This is episode number 34 of the Expert Table Tennis Podcast. My name is Ben Larcombe, and joining me on the show today is England's Gavin Evans. My listeners from the UK will of course know all about Gavin, but for those who are further afield, Gavin is 23 years old. He's been playing table tennis for an incredible 18 years. That's right, he started when he was just 5 years old. Very quickly became the best player in his age group, going all the way through to cadets and into the juniors, winning a string of national titles along the way. Then in 2008 he was crowned the European singles table tennis champion, the best player in Europe, ranked number 1 and ranked number 4 in the world. But then as a junior he struggled with hip injuries. He had 3 different surgeries on his hip and ended up not being able to train or compete to the kind of level he'd need to in order to take that next step and to become a professional. Gavin is now living in the Nottingham area in the Midlands of England and working as a full-time table tennis coach. He still plays. He's ranked number 9 in England and plays for Ormsby in the Senior British League. So loads of experience as a player and a coach. We're going to share Gavin's story, get some top tips from him. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Joining me on the show today is Gavin Evans. Hi, Gavin.
Hi, Ben. How you doing?
Yeah, really well, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Got a little bit of a cough, but I'm doing fine, thank you.
Great, good stuff. Okay, so I thought it would be really good today to just share your story with my audience, and maybe we can pick out some tips along the way from, I mean, you've been playing table tennis for a long time. You're only 23 years old. I think you started playing at the age of 5 or something, did you?
Yeah. So I've been playing what seems like an eternity now. But yeah, about 5 years old, I started at Sydenham Table Tennis Club, and I've played, every day since, really. So yeah, long time for someone who's only 23.
Are you able to remember a time before you played table tennis?
Do you know, so many people ask me that. I can't really. I remember, because my brothers were very good as well. They're slightly older than me. I remember going to table tennis venues when I was so young, and I remember learning to tie my shoelaces in the table tennis hall. And I remember a time where I could literally just duck my chin and walk under the table and collect all the balls for the older players. So to be honest, no, I can't really.
So you completely grew up in the table tennis club?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Sydenham Table Tennis Club was very much where I spent my life for so many years, up until sort of early teenagers, really, and then I moved up to the Midlands after that. Yeah.
Great. Now, on your website, I saw that you said that you're actually the youngest player ever to be ranked in England. So you must have started playing competitively at a pretty young age as well, not just kind of training, but actually going around to tournaments.
Yeah.
How can you remember like your first tournaments and how that felt?
Yeah, I can very much. That was really some of the most great times in my career. So I started playing, say, 4 or 5, and I was very quickly into matches. I would play my brothers and play all different kinds of people down at the club. I think I was playing competitions at maybe, late 5-year-old, early 6-year-old, and I was playing sort of the Cirencesters and the One Star Sydenham summer events. And yeah, I got onto the ranking list. I remember going over to the Isle of Man where Bradley was playing in a competition. I said to my dad, "Why aren't I ranked, Dad? Can you get me on the ranking list?" And then about 3 weeks later, I had a couple of good wins and I was on. And I was 6 years old on the ranking list. And I remember my dad saying, "Wow, that's an amazing achievement." And I wanted to get in some kind of record book, but that never really happened. But yeah, 6 years old on the ranking list.
And you've mentioned your brothers, Brad and Miles. I reckon they must have had a pretty big impact on your table tennis because, how much older are they than you? What's the age gap?
So Miles is 18 months older than me, and Bradley is 3 years and 10 months older than me, I believe. Yeah. So yeah, they had a massive impact in my career, really. It's so good when you go down to the club, and Bradley was already a very good player. Miles and myself were sort of growing up together, and it was that healthy sibling rivalry. Although it can sometimes get a bit heated, at the end of the day, you always want the best for your brothers. So, competing against each other as well. We just pushed each other on in such a positive way, and I think that's why we got so much success as a young family.
Yeah, no, I've been looking through the kind of ranking lists, and I'm a bit of a rankings geek. I love going through old ranking lists and looking at kind of where people were ranked relative to other players and how they went on over time.
Yeah.
Um, you very quickly got very highly ranked. I mean, starting through the first few years, I think you actually, by the time you were 11, you were ranked higher than Brad when Brad was 15. So kind of, I'm assuming that you were all doing similar training. Is that right, or were you training more than the other two?
Um, no, we were doing similar training. Bradley at that time would have been at the National Academy in Nottingham, and I think it's just the desire within me. You know, when you have a brother who is already at the National Academy, living away from home, it was just in me. I wanted to be that person as well, and I wanted to be a part of that. And I remember it felt bad if they didn't welcome me as a part of that. So, in my eyes, the only way to be a part of that sort of arrangement at Nottingham was just to be as good as I could possibly be. So, I remember playing and playing and playing and competing. And even on a Thursday night, Sippenham had an open session where a lot of the older people would come down and play as well. And I'd arrive there about 5 p.m. I'd still be there at about 11 p.m. My dad would say, "Come on, Gav, you've got to go back now. We've got to go to school. Mum's going to be really upset with me." And I would literally cry the whole way home. And I just think when you have a passion like that for a sport, it's almost impossible not to become good. So I think that's really what happened. It was just, we all played the same, but maybe my passion was slightly more.
Yeah, so perhaps there's something inside you, either just from birth or through the environment, that meant that you were just more suited to really reaching the top.
Yeah, I think a lot of success in anything is down to an element of luck. And I think I was born at the right time. And like you say, the environment around me was absolutely perfect at that time. And I just loved challenging myself. It wasn't about scared to lose or anything. It was about who can I beat today, and it was always such a good challenge, and I had such good fun. And the coaches down there, Ken Phillips, etc., they were such great people. It was like you were having so much fun while improving and getting better, and that was what it was about for me.
Mm, cool. Well, you've mentioned Sippenham, which is kind of just west of London for people that are not familiar with it. Then you've talked about kind of Nottingham as well. I know that your family moved kind of up north or to the Midlands at some point.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
How old were you when that happened, and was that kind of a purely table tennis move, or was there like another reason?
I think it was heavily influenced by the National Academy being in Nottingham at that point. We moved to a little village called East Bridgefield at the start, where we rented some accommodation before our house was being built, and that was going to be in Newark. And I remember that at that time, my dad stayed down because he was working, I believe, in Wembley somewhere, and he stayed down for 6 months and looked after the house while that was going through and being sold, and then we all moved up here. But I must have been about 10 years old when we had finally settled up here. And I was going into the academy regularly to train then. And at that point as well, we were lucky. We had a couple of Chinese players living with us, so we were using them as sparring partners as well. So yeah, amazing support from my family in particular, and I think all of it helped.
Yeah, so as a 10 or 11-year-old, you were able to train with your brothers who were older. You were able to get access to kind of the England setup. You also had people like Paul Drinkle and Darius Knight, who were a few years older than you, that I know you kind of were able to do a lot of practice with. So it almost seems like people kind of put you as a 10 and 11-year-old just in with the same group of all the kind of 13, 14-year-olds.
Yeah, I mean that's right. Myself and Paul Drinkle and Darius Knight, we very much travelled the world together for so many years, and we lived together for so many years. And yeah, that was right. That was another great influence in my life. Living with the likes of them players, you want to again be like them. You want to do what they do. And I remember for many years, being with Paul, and we were competing against each other. Although he was still better than me. My aim was to be as strong as him in the gym, to be as quick as him on the track, and to be as good as him a table tennis player. And the nature of he was, the best in Europe and the best in the world. And if I was anywhere close to his heels, I was also going to be awesome at my age. So that's how I looked at that. So yeah, again, a really lucky thing to be a part of. And we lived some great memories together.
Yeah, I know. I remember back kind of in, I don't know when it would be, kind of 2004, 2005. Like there was a lot of anticipation about you in particular, because we'd already started to see Paul and Darius getting these good results, and people are thinking like Gavin's 3 years younger and he's already like not that far behind them. So there was a huge amount of buzz in English table tennis about the three of you and what you could go on to achieve. Did you ever feel like there was any kind of pressure, or do you think you were just too young and just enjoying it back then?
Not at all. I've never ever felt pressure solely on the basis of it's such a privilege to be the best in the country and the best in Europe. When we were sort of travelling around the world and sort of putting our stamp on Europe, and at one stage we were both ranked number one in Europe for many years, sort of thing. It wasn't ever pressure. It was like, how good is this? We're sort of travelling around the world doing what we love. Every time we walked into an arena, people knew us and we were, the best in Europe. So I just felt I was on top of the world. And if I lost occasionally, which I didn't really lose in Europe for a number of years, but if I did lose, it was more that, sort of bad day at the office, come back and do it all again. And so, I suppose I've been really lucky. I've never felt a responsibility. I've always felt I've been in a really privileged position, and I'm really excited to go out there again and be recognised as a good player.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to how you respond to the situation, because the situation isn't any different, but you kind of have a choice whether to see that as kind of a burden or a privilege, and you've chosen to see it as a privilege.
That's right. I think that's, you've got to really, because you work all your life or for all the time you've been playing to get to that number one spot, and if you got to the number one spot and thought, oh blimey, this is the burden, there's no point of doing it. I sort of, I don't like to say worked all my life. I played all my life, and I then got to the position of being number one, and it was such a good feeling, and I loved every minute of it. So yeah.
Nice. Well, in 2005, you became the European Under-12 champion. I'm just interested in thinking, at the time, had you been over to China? I know you've been to China a lot. How did you see your level at that age matching up with the Chinese, and what were the similarities and differences there?
Well, it was really interesting. When we went to China, I was probably I think I was 10 years old the first time I went to China. And that was very much, we went on a training trip, and I just sort of was in my element. I loved it. All the different foods, all the different training, and getting to grips with the heat, etc. And then I remember going again when I was 11, and I played the under 13, the number one in China under 13 in a club in Hebei, and I beat him. So that was for me like the most amazing achievement. It was like I've just beaten someone a year or two older than me who's the best in China, and I thought, blimey, I'm a serious player now. And that was an awesome feeling. And then again, a couple of years later, I went back and played all the under 15, so all the best in the country of China under 15. I think I was 13, and I lost a few matches and I won a few matches, so I was very much in the mix, and that was what really spurred me on as well. The fact that China are without doubt the greatest table tennis nation ever, and I was sort of really competing with them. So again, really privileged to do that, and that just made me keep wanting to go and go and go.
And were they kind of shocked that you were able to take them on? Because I do get this feeling that they don't expect much from the European countries. They kind of assume that they'll be able to walk through everyone.
Yeah, I think they were, but we had a Chinese coach, Lu Jie, and he was amazing when we went to China. He knew many people and obviously spoke the language very well. And he used to say how they were so glad but also shocked at the same time, because it wasn't just me beating the Chinese. Paul and Darius were taking them out as well, and it was like, what has happened to England? This new era of English players beating the Chinese and clearly being the best in Europe. It was just an amazing sort of era. So I think the Chinese welcomed it. It was like, wow, we've got some English people coming to challenge us, and we had good laughs with them, and the thing is with China, they have so many good players. It's not just you play the best under 15 and that's the best. They've got 35 good 15-year-olds who every single one of them is so difficult to beat. So yeah, I think in one respect they were loving it, but in the other respect they're still thinking very much, well, we've got 35 of you, sort of thing. So
yeah. So you've mentioned kind of how strong England were in the juniors, the cadets, kind of like 10 years ago. But we've got plenty of decent young players now, but people wouldn't kind of say that England were the best kind of cadets in Europe or the best juniors in Europe, anything like that. What do you think has changed? Is it purely that kind of like we had the funding and that's now gone, or is there more to it?
I don't know. I mean, obviously funding helps because you can have a national centre. And I think having a national centre created unity within the team. And I think unity is a massive thing when you want to achieve anything. And when we travelled, across Europe to play, myself, Darius, Paul, Liam, etc., we were all so close as friends, and we just fought together. And when you go back into the training environment and work hard together, do the multiple together, do the runs together, it just creates this amazing team spirit. And we just trained really, really hard, and we enjoyed it. And I just think with that unity, anything can be achieved. So I think the funding very much helped that because we could have a national centre, and I think that's one thing we miss these days, not having a national centre. So yeah, for me, one thing really would be if we could get a national centre back, that would then help the youngsters.
Yeah, and it was very much like very young players were coming and moving to the national centre as opposed to just kind of going for weekends and bits and bobs, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean there was a small group of us who moved there full time, and we were training, literally 30 to 35 hours a week, and we had people looking after us in the gym. We had a physio and nutritionist, and it was a very, very professional setup, and that massively contributed to our success. But having said that, we'd all had an awful lot of success before the national centre had arrived. It just helped us on our way. So I think we were a very special group of people anyway, and then the national centre kept us going for a period. But yeah, again, very lucky to have that national centre, and it was a great experience. And that's one thing, I hope one day might come back, to create, English people training on, English turf instead of always training abroad, because then it's far more patriotic to do that, and then the unity will come back.
Yeah, definitely. Now something that you just mentioned there was kind of Liam Pitchford, who I'm assuming all my listeners will know of. Liam is now kind of top 50 in the world and living in Germany, doing very well as a professional player. I'm wondering at what point in your kind of cadet and junior careers did you first become aware of Liam? Because he certainly hadn't been around when you were a lot younger. And how did you and Liam's kind of rivalry develop through the cadets and the juniors? At what point did he kind of start becoming a threat?
Well, interestingly, Liam's always been a threat. I remember playing him in a schools final when I was about 10 or 11 years old, so I have known him for a long time, and he always had an amazing talent for the game. A very tenacious attitude, great backhand, as you'll see. He's always had that good backhand, so he's always been, a big threat, and he's always been one of the best in the country, really. But when he really started to make his stamp in Europe as well was 2007, 2006 when we were both, I was number one in Europe and Liam was number 3 in Europe. So at that stage, he was already an amazing player, and from then on it was very much trying to keep up with each other and enjoying that friendly rivalry again. And some of the matches we've had in the training halls and things have been epic, but also very fun. And so really, I think Liam's always been someone in my mind because he's always had an unbelievable gift for the game. But I think what maybe helped me was I was naturally quite big when I was younger, whereas Liam wasn't quite as big, so maybe suffered with power up until 13, 14, and then he started to get very quick, very powerful, and then it was very difficult then to fend him off.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you said that because that was going to be my next question. I found a couple of pictures of you and Liam from back in 2008, and the difference between the two of you is just unbelievable. I mean, I think you're probably both 15 at this stage, but Gavin, you could easily be 16 or 17 looking at you, whereas Liam looks kind of almost 12 or 13. Like the difference in size, just like looking at your arms and legs, like there's nothing to Liam at all, whereas you almost look like an adult man. Like, what kind of effect did that have on kind of your training and everything that was going on? Because it seems like, they talk about people being late bloomers and coming up later, and it's certainly, looking at these pictures, I'll share them with you later. It seems like Liam was definitely someone who was always going to struggle as kind of like a 14-year-old when there can be such a big variation in the size and development of players, but then maybe he was always going to come through as he kind of developed a bit later on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we had very bit different body types, and I was quite big, quite strong, and so that helped me in the gym. I could still get stronger, get quicker, and I was able to do slightly more advanced things in my physical practice. But Liam being Liam, he was also really trying to do a lot of physical as well. He's very competitive, got a real strong will for anything he puts his mind to, and he was also doing the gym we were doing, just maybe slightly lower weights at that stage, and he was, like I say, when I was younger, I was snapping at the heels of my brothers. Liam was very much doing that with me and Paul in the gym. So although he was a lot smaller, he was still doing his very best in the physical practice, as we all were. But I don't know really. Did it play a massive part in maybe me being better at that age? I'm not sure. I think Pitchford had an unbelievable talent for the game. He had a great backhand. He was very quick. He had a great head on his shoulders. And I just think by the time 13 and 14 came, it didn't really play a massive part because, like I say, he was number 3 in Europe and I was number 1, so there wasn't an awful lot to choose between us.
Okay, but yeah, perhaps in other sports, more kind of physical, aggressive sports where you're smashing into each other, it would have maybe
Oh,
prevented him from coming
yeah,
through.
I mean, if we were playing, I don't know, rugby or football, then it definitely would play a part, I think. But when you're playing, it normally would play a part in table tennis. But you look at Pitchford, he's 39 in the world, and not many people get to that. So I think that was a testament to his character because back then he was a lot smaller than us, but he had something inside him which kept him snapping at our heels. So that was something which was great. And yes, it may have held him back a little bit, but not massively, I don't think.
Sure. So moving on, I think I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it seems to me like the kind of the real highlight of your career was the European Youth in 2008. Is that kind of where you feel like you played your best table tennis and it all came together?
I don't. It's interesting. I don't think I've played my best tape test. I've probably played some of my best tape tests in, senior nationals or I won the Youth Olympics or something like that. I played really well. But I think why it was so special for me was um, I was expecting to win it the year before. I wanted to win it the year before, and I lost from 5-0 up in the seventh to Patrick Francisca in the quarter final, which was a massive, massive blow for me because I think I was ranked number 1 in Europe at that stage. So that really hurt me. And then I went back and I was training hard, and then I got to Terni in 2008, and I felt good. But they were all, really rooting for me and wanting to beat me. And I think I had so many match points against me. I think I saved 12 or 13 over the course of the tournament. In particular, I was 3-3, 10-6 down in the last 16. I was 3-2, 10-8 down in the quarterfinal. So I had so many match points. So when I won the last match and I beat Hampus in the final, it was such a relief, and it was an amazing sort of fight more than anything. And I think it was probably the tournament where my head was so strong, and I really would have done anything to win. In terms of did I play my best, probably not, but it would definitely go down in my catalogue of success as probably the most enjoyable tournament because of It was just amazing. It was a small hall. There was so much atmosphere. The English were really behind me. There was songs being sang in the crowd, and it was an amazing experience. One that I'll never forget.
Now, when you mention your head being strong in the tournament, and maybe maybe you feel like you weren't playing your best table tennis, but you were able to kind of come through regardless. What do you mean by that? How can people put that into their own game in their own tournaments? Maybe they're at an event, they're expected to win, they're one of the top seeds, but they're kind of not feeling like it's all clicking. What can you do to really kind of like win when you're not feeling at 100% kind of your best table tennis?
I think the most important thing when you're not playing your best table tennis is to show everyone in the hall that you think you are playing your best. So that is a mind game where people don't quite know how you're feeling. And the second thing is to just be professional of what you do. Go, make sure you warm up, make sure you get yourself in the right frame of mind. Do the right things when you're eating, etc., and don't get involved in any like silliness off the table, and just take 1 point at a time. Play every point. It's a best of 7. It's a very, very long match. Some of the matches were going on for nearly an hour, and it's just take 1 point at a time. I think at that stage, what gave me a huge amount of confidence was how fit I was. I genuinely felt I was the fittest in the hall. No one had worked as hard as me in that time. So I was really quite confident at that point that I was the fittest, and I felt I deserved it, and I just kept plodding away, taking 1 point at a time and keeping strong, making it seem like I was playing well, even though maybe deep down I didn't feel I was playing great, and just keep going. And one of the things which sticks out in my mind as well is in the Europeans it's 10 days, but on the Wednesday you have a day off where many of the other countries go in the swimming pool or they go to the town centre. I remember being in the training hall practicing what I felt needed to be better to beat my rivals, and then I went and had maybe a Coke or something in the shade, and then came back fresh the next day. So it was really everything for 10 days was so much dedication to winning this title, and I just felt I deserved it more than everyone else. And then I think that's what gave me that inner confidence in them tight moments.
Yeah, so would you describe yourself as a kind of like really hardworking, dedicated, I don't know, because I guess everyone would describe themselves like that, but some players like to kind of just let things flow and not worry too much and kind of turn up and believe that they'll play their best. Others like to kind of try and control everything and like make sure they're the one training when everyone else is having a relax. Like how do you view your own
I've never ever been one to think that, oh, I'm naturally gifted, so I will be fine on the day. I've always had the mentality that my confidence comes from what I do in the training hall. Now, if I've trained really hard, I've eaten the right stuff, I've been professional in every aspect of my life, I've kept myself strong, injury-free, then my confidence is sky high because my confidence comes from my preparation. So for me, it's very much I need to work hard. I need to make sure I've got my right rubbers on my bat. I need to make sure I'm doing everything in life. And then, I feel great going into a competition. Equally, if I don't work, if I haven't played as much table tennis as I'd like or something's happened in my preparation, then maybe I struggle a bit too much. And that was maybe a weakness in my game, that if everything wasn't, say, perfect, then I felt a little bit not as confident. So really, I was an absolute workhorse because I wanted to win so much. So I made myself before every competition train so hard.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of like the pros and cons of both approaches. Is if you're putting your hopes of winning on your training, then training needs to have gone well in order for you to feel confident. Whereas if you have some kind of slightly deluded belief that you're able to not work as hard as everyone else but still win because you're super talented, then you can maybe get away with not training as hard and still somehow you're not making it hard for yourself because you don't believe that you're going to do well because of the training or because you didn't manage to get a decent knock up beforehand or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, it didn't really have the way I was playing in training. I could have been playing terribly in training. That was fine. It was just it's more my mentality. If I'm dedicated to the tournament and if I'm dedicated to winning, then I will make sure my preparation's good, and I'll always go in there with a real attitude of I want to win this competition and I'm going to do my very best to. So yeah, preparation's key.
So I guess moving on from that, I'm not sure exactly when this happened, but you started to get these kind of injury problems, and I know you had hip surgeries. I wonder if you could tell us a little more about kind of that, when it happened, and the kind of effect that it had on your table tennis career.
Yeah, so um, Europeans in Terni, when I won it, I didn't have any pain, and I mean I've never been the most flexible person in the world, but I've always been very strong and I've always been very quick at things. But I remember playing the Luxembourg Senior Open. I think me and Danny Reed actually won the senior team event there. We beat Belarus in the final, which was a great victory. But in the singles event of that competition, I felt in so much pain, it was unbelievable. And I remember turning around to Alan Cook saying, I just simply can't move. And all of the coaches were saying, "Oh, just take some ibuprofen, etc." And I was just thinking, it really won't make any difference. I'm in so much pain right now. I don't know what's happened. So I sort of lost quite early to a Greek player, and I just wasn't really bothered about the loss. I was more thinking, what on earth's going on with my hip? I then went back to England and arranged a visit to Richard Villa in St John's Wood in London, which he's a great surgeon. And he basically said to me, "Wow, your hip is so damaged. The cartilage is, completely worn away, and it's one of the worst hips he's ever seen." So we quickly arranged some surgery to sort of fix that. So once the surgery was over, I tried to go back into training hall, and it still wasn't right. So eventually, I've had 3 operations. And one of my hips was perfect, but my hip right now, my left hip is still not good at all, and sometimes I wake up and struggle to walk sometimes. So yeah, it's been a massive blow to sort of a great career, and it happened so young, unfortunately. But what's really interesting about the hip is no one really knows if it's hereditary or maybe doing too much when I was younger. So yeah.
Yeah, because that's actually what I was just going to ask. Kind of, do you think that because you obviously did a lot of training as a young player, more so than anyone else. I was going to see, did the surgeon think that could have caused it? Did you do too much? Was it the gym? I don't know, but maybe there's just no answer to those questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, difficult to say. One thing I would say is my femoral head, which is basically the top of your femur bone, your thigh bone, that has a ball at the top of that, and that was actually misshaped. So in terms of it being a good hip should be totally circular, but mine had a straight line on one of the sides, which was then knocking into the cartilage. But that isn't what causes the pain. That when it knocks into the cartilage isn't when it causes pain. When it causes pain is when your cartilage is then broken, so it's like sort of hitting a raw wound, and that's then when I started to feel a lot of pain. Now, it could have been for all of my life I've had a deformation of the hip bone because, like I told you before, I've never been greatly flexible, and maybe that was why, because it was stopping the motion of the right movement. So it's maybe that I've had 7 or 8 years of trying to get myself into positions that maybe my body wasn't meant for, and then my cartilages are so damaged they're irreparable now. So I would suggest it was probably that my hip was the way it was, and I then damaged my hips by trying to get myself into a position which you need to in table tennis. Because I do remember the surgeon saying if I was a sprinter or some kind of runner, I probably wouldn't have ever got the hip pain because of the movements are different.
Okay, yeah. So it's more, I guess table tennis, you're low, you're bent down, your kind of hips are almost apart, aren't they? A
Yeah.
bit to give you like a wide stance. You think that's maybe just not ideal for whatever kind
I
of
think so, and I think
hip shape you've got.
yeah, I think that's right, and I think the twisting in the hips when you're playing, strong fours. I was a very forehand dominated player anyway, and also just the positions you get yourself into every day. maybe didn't suit my shape hip. But how do you know that until it sort of starts to hurt you? So yeah.
Sure. How kind of at the time did you take that? I assume you would have been like unbelievably gutted, because it seemed like you were on this kind of fast track to kind of success at the junior and the senior level.
Well, it was unbelievably gutting. Based on, at that time, I think I was 25 in the world under 18, and I was only 16 years old.
Yeah.
And then I realised that I simply can't play anymore without pain. I couldn't move as quick as I wanted to. I couldn't do the shots anymore. For example, that a simple backhand topspin I couldn't do as well because of the pain in my hip was so much. So yeah, it was really, really hard to take. And I had my first operation at 16, and I still had a really positive outlook on it. I came back and I won the junior nationals, and I went on to the junior Europeans. We won bronze in the team. I then won 2 under-21 titles after that. But I still couldn't get away from the pain I was in when playing. So when I got to maybe 22, I started to think, this is pretty devastating. I'm not sure I'll ever be as fit as I used to be. So I sort of had to take different decisions. But yeah, really, really hard to take. I remember I was on crutches for 22 weeks. And 22 weeks, was it, or 22 months? 22 weeks I was on crutches. And I remember sitting there in front of the TV thinking, wow, how my life has changed. I've never sat in front of the TV. I've never done this. And I was struggling for a bit. I was a little bit, upset and depressed, really, because my life had drastically changed, and I had to sort of figure out what I was going to do next.
Yeah, I remember being at high performance training sessions in Nottingham or Grantham, and I think sometimes you'd kind of come along to watch because your younger brother was there,
Yeah.
and it was just such a sad sight to see you, because I know that it really hadn't been that much earlier, maybe like kind of 12 months before, that Alex Perry and the other coaches there had all been so excited by kind of like the results, and like you weren't even there, but people were just like constantly talking about Gavin Evans all the time and kind of all these great results you were getting. And then to see you then kind of like coming in your crutches and sitting down on the bench and kind of not really even being able to go and grab the balls for people, it was just horrible to watch.
Yeah, it was horrible to experience as well, really. But I think in life, things are, sent to test us, and that was one of the hurdles I had to get over in life, and I'm very much over that hurdle now and enjoying what I'm doing now. And I think sometimes we've just got to say, this was meant to be. Maybe I'm going to be successful in something else in my future.
It certainly seems like throughout your life you've had a very good positive response to kind of dealing with things that are happening and the way that you interpret it.
Yeah, I think the one thing I've always got to remember is to achieve what I've achieved takes a very special person. It takes a very special head on one's shoulders. So if I can then transfer the head I had when I was younger and playing table tennis into something I do in the future, whether it be in business or whether it be in something else, if I put the same work ethic in and I have the same sort of natural flair for it, then why can't I do something successful in my future, which might not be playing table tennis, but it'll certainly be something I'll enjoy and maybe help other people.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because you can get a lot more from table tennis than just the table tennis. And I think like a brilliant example of this is Zach Zalesnik, who's now doing his Zach Abel. He's kind of becoming quite a popular musician, and I just think it shows that he was obviously number one in his age group for table tennis. And I think you learn the value of hard work and the belief that if you stick to something and put in the practice or the training, and that things will pay off. And I think you can, once you've mastered that and you've learned it in table tennis, then you can, like you say, you can apply it to business or becoming a pop star or whatever. Because if you are prepared to do the work and you believe that it will pay off, then I think there's a much greater chance that you're actually going to experience success in other stuff.
Oh, absolutely, and it's one of them things as well that there's never only one road. Like in table tennis, you have to learn to win in so many different ways. So if anyone starts off in something that doesn't work, there's always another way to go and another way to go, and eventually one of them tracks will work. It might take slightly longer and you want it, but I think if you have that desire, dedication, and you enjoy the journey, I think you can keep changing your business model until it works, and eventually when it does work, then you'll be incredibly proud of yourself.
Definitely good advice. You're now doing kind of a bit of coaching. I believe you're still playing a fair amount of table tennis, kind of British League and stuff like that. What's life like for you now, Gavin?
Well, yeah, I played British League last season for Ormsby. We came second. I still had some great victories. I beat Chris Duran. I beat the Petkoff. I beat a Chinese, and I beat the Israeli guy Michael Tauber. So I still very much enjoy competing. I have that still winning edge. But after a weekend of British League, I then struggled to walk for a couple of days. But life for me now is very much going into many schools, trying to create participation around the area. And hopefully with a lot of participation, then we can start to introduce some different sessions which are aimed towards players who really want to be successful and really want to achieve. And then I can start working with them players and try and get them into a situation where they're possibly doing what I was doing when I was younger. I also have a great passion for helping some of the elite players as well. I don't know if you saw the Nationals. I was in Tom Jarvis's corner, and that's something I'm very much passionate about. Seeing his desire, seeing the way he really, really loves table tennis and his want to win, and sitting in his corner is very, very rewarding as well. Seeing him, win some amazing events. He won the under-21 Nationals. He gave Paul a great game in the semi-final of the Open. So that was still very enjoyable for me.
So you're really covering all the levels of table tennis, from the beginners in schools right the way up to some of the best players in the country.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so on a weekly basis, I see about 140 to 150 7 to 9 year olds. I then work at the University of Nottingham, and that's the performance squad there. They're doing very, very well. And then I also do the one-to-ones with the likes of Tom Jarvis, etc.
What do you think makes you a good coach, Gavin? What's your USP, or what have you got that separates you from other coaches? What kind of angle and strengths do you give to players?
I think you've got to understand the player. You've got to understand the person within, and then work a model for them. Now, someone like Tom has an unbelievable work ethic. He never says no to any physical, so you can really push him hard and get the best out of him that way. But there's some other players which are a bit more sensitive and need a different approach, and maybe more of a tactical approach, and that's something which you've got to be aware of when you're coaching, that not everyone's the same. You've got to look at them as an individual, what makes them tick, and then find out how to get them, ticking in the right positive way.
Great, good advice. And I think that the science definitely backs you up there of moving from just coaching people all the same in kind of a cookie cutter approach to definitely, we're starting to see people going into a lot more individual coaching, trying to adjust things to the athletes.
Yeah.
And it sounds very good.
It's also about what stage of the season you're at. You've got to really look at periods of the season where you are going to look at maybe strengthening your body to make you quicker, maybe wide forehand. But there's also a period of time where if you've got a very big match schedule, you've got to look at how do you win points? How do you get this player's confidence up so they believe that they're very strong on the backhand? How do you work on their strengths so they become so good? And winning points is ultimately what table tennis is about at the highest level. So when you have got an area or a period of time where there's a lot of table tennis matches, really work on winning points. But then if you have 8 weeks off where there's not so many or not so important table tennis competition, then you can really look at maybe some technical development and then some physical development.
Yeah, so really switching it up throughout the season, not just always kind of doing the same weekly thing over and over.
Yeah, and then you keep it fresh and you keep them enjoying it.
Sounds good. Okay, so we're kind of reaching the end now. What I like to do is ask every guest to give a top tip. I think I've kind of forgotten in the last couple of episodes, but I do like the top tip section. So Gavin, have you got a top tip for the listeners to help them kind of improve their table tennis?
Yeah, so my top tip would be the most important thing to create career longevity is to have a good table tennis body. Now, like we've spoken about in this interview, my body broke down, so clearly I maybe didn't look after my body as much when I was younger, and I was looking at maybe short-term success and looking at how do I get so good at a young age. And I think what's really important for younger players is to think about, if you can reach a career where you're going on till you're 40 years old, then you have so much time to improve. But if your body doesn't allow you to get to 40, then your career is shortened. So really think about, when you're younger, doing the right things physically to get your body bulletproof, and then you'll have a nice long career, and you can learn to play the strokes, which maybe some people never get to learn to play them because their body breaks down.
Yeah, because we do see a lot of, even the top Chinese and your Waldners and those players really having these ridiculously long careers, which just gives them, they can continue to be improving their ranking or whatever, not just in their 20s, but in their kind of 30s. You look at Samsonov, how old is he? Like 40 years old, and he's still kind of top 10 in the world.
Yeah, I think it's the professional approach to how you look after your body. So many people have a professional approach about when they go on the table, they're going to play back and forth so quickly, etc. But one of the biggest things in life is looking after what allows you to do that, and that is your body. So if anything, try to look into some kind of sports science behind your particular sport, and then really build your body into a supple, relaxed, strong, nimble body, so you can undertake some of the harshest training.
Actually, that reminds me of something that I picked up in Denmark from a coach called Li Yang, who's the technical coach of the German national team.
Yeah.
And he was... So up until that point, a couple of years ago when I met him, I always kind of thought that the whole point of technique is to be, more power, more efficient, more spin, stuff like that. Whereas he was really focused on the reason that the Chinese love their technique so much is because if you play with the right technique, then you won't get injured.
That's right.
And he was even saying that Timo Boll is always injured because he plays his forehand wrong, which, maybe he's exaggerating a little bit, but his point was that Timo Boll's forehand is more likely to injure him than like a typical Chinese forehand. And if you they start learning everything correctly for this kind of long-term pyramid thing that they've got going over there right from a young age to make sure that they're not picking up all these bad habits. And technique can be part of that, getting the technique right so that you're not going to injure yourself. You see loads of players kind of like throwing their shoulders around on forehand shots, and that's just a lot more likely to get you injured than playing in kind of a more relaxed manner.
That's right. I mean, as soon as you start doing something which is unnatural, and you start cranking forearms or moving in a weird way or having your back in a bad posture, then you're more likely to create injuries. And I think that's so important, that you can get power by relaxation. If you think of martial arts or anything like that, the maximum power comes from maximum relaxation. And I think that's really important. And when you look at some of the greatest players in history, you think, wow, they make it look so easy. They make it look like they're not even trying, but they are. They've just learnt to create power and spin with relaxation, and that will help you not get injured. So really think about not cranking shots and staying relaxed even under massive pressure.
Are there any other tips for creating this kind of bulletproof body that's going to stop you from getting injured that are specific for table tennis? What kind of muscles need to be strong? In which kind of ways do you need to be flexible? Have you got any tips there?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing in table tennis, if you look at loads and loads of injuries, is shoulders and hips. So to create good hip strength, you need to be looking at your glute work. So try and get a lot of glute control. You can look at them. In fact, I'm actually going to be putting a few on the internet to help the audience with glute control exercises, glute strengthening exercises. And then you've got to look at your muscles below your what they call the six packs. So you have muscles inside which help you, and you need to get them controlled. And then flexible hamstrings, strong core. And with the shoulder, what's important is we always spend our time going forward with our shot. So we're playing forehand, which is our arm going in the forward direction, which is creating very strong anterior delts and very strong pec muscles, but what we neglect is our trapezius right at the back, which pulls our shoulder blade in, and that is what helps us then create a good strength in our back and in our shoulder. So it's really important to do a lot of pulling exercises in table tennis to strengthen up the mid trapezius around your shoulder blade, and then that will help not get injured in the front of your shoulder.
Nice. You sound like a sports science graduate or a physio. Have you just picked this up kind of as you've gone along? You haven't done any uni courses or anything, have you?
Well, I've done a personal training course, so I understand I understand the body a lot.
I see.
Muscle,
Okay.
How to build muscle, how to strengthen your body, how to get control around around your core. But I think what's also helped me is I've spent so much time in the physio room, and I've taken so much in from the physios, which have helped me. I'm just speaking from experience.
Sure. Yeah. This is like your area of expertise.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that's been great, Gavin. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Been a pleasure, Ben. Thank you.
You've got a website and you've just got kind of Instagram and a few other social things. How can people find you online?
Yeah, so if you follow me on Twitter, it's Gavin Evans TT. You'll find me there. My website is also Gavin Evans TT. And then my Facebook is Gavin Evans or GT Sports. And if you like my Facebook page, that'd be great. It's GT Sports Fitness and Table Tennis Coaching. So yeah, I'd really appreciate if some of you could like my page.
Nice. I'll put the links in the show notes on the Expert Table Tennis website. And I guess if people are in the kind of Nottingham, Lincolnshire area, get some table tennis coaching as well?
Yeah, that would be excellent.
You do one-to-one and stuff at clubs and schools and all of that?
One-to-ones, if you do want to improve any of your game, just get in contact with me. I'd really like to help. And also if you do have any kind of club or village hall and you want me to come and do an appearance and help bring on your table tennis club in a positive way, just get in touch with me as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gavin.
Thank you, Ben.
Have a good day. I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye. I'd just like to say a big thank you to Gavin Evans for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I had a lot of fun during that interview. I hope that you enjoyed listening to it. Please head over to Facebook. You can search for GTE Sports to like Gavin's Facebook page. I know he's got lots of blogs coming out looking at table tennis coaching and also kind of the physical and the nutrition side of the sport. So GTE Sports on Facebook. Go and like Gavin's page. I really liked how at the end of that interview, Gavin was talking about the importance of thinking long term and not just short term, especially for young players. Building up your body so that it's able to deal with the demands of the kind of training you're going to need to do in order to become a good player, and not just thinking about winning matches and winning points kind of in the here and now. That's something that obviously he's got quite a lot of experience in, but I think it's very wise advice for all players to be thinking about what kind of physical components do you need, what kind of strengths, flexibility, all those bits do you need in order to be able to continue training and not get injured down the line. So definitely something to think about. Gavin had some great tips. Check those out and see if you can add those to your training. To check out the show notes for this podcast, you can head to experttabletennis.com/episode 34. We'll have a bit more information. I'll put the photos up on there of Gavin and Liam from back in 2008 for you to have a look at. And we'll also have links to some of the things that came up in the interview. I'll be back in a month's time with a new episode for you on the 1st of June. Until then, good luck in your table tennis. And if you have any questions for me, you can drop me an email at ben@experttabletennis.com.